So we're going to look a little bit at multiplying fractions. Now, multiplying fractions in many ways is actually one of the easiest operations with fractions. Adding and subtracting requires all common denominators, knowing common multiples and all those kind of things. But multiplying fractions, we just kind of have three quick steps, which I see are already written down here for us. Number one, multiply the numerators. Number two, multiply the denominators. Number three, simplify. So we're going to look at a couple examples of that. Okay, so let's say for our first example, if I had something like 2/3 times 1/2. All I'm going to do is multiply the numerators. Again, the numerators are the top numbers. So 2 times 1 equals 2, and that is our new numerator. Then I'm going to do step 2, which is multiply the denominators, which is just 3 times 2 equals 6. And then step 3, always simplify your answer. So we can see 2 and 6 both can be divided by 2. 2 is a factor of both of them. So I'm going to divide both of those by 2, and that gives me 1/3 as my final answer. Right? That's it. I've multiplied. Now, since I was multiplying by a fraction, multiplying by a half, our number actually got smaller because multiplying by 1/2 is the same thing as dividing by 2. So let's look at another example. Let's say instead of just having fractions, let's say you happen to have a mixed number. So you have something like 2 2/3 times 1/2. Now in this case, what you always have to do, since you're just multiplying numerators and denominators, is you have to make improper fractions. So your whole fraction is not a mixed number anymore. So I would do 2 times 3 gives me 6, 7, 8. So 2 2/3 is the same thing as 8/3 times 1/2. And again, I'm just going to multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. So 8 times 1 equals 8, 3 times 2 equals 6, and then simplify my answer. So divide by 2, that gives me 4/3. Then it's improper, so I want to make sure I turn it to a mixed number at the end, and so that would equal 1 1/3. Okay, so again, just turn it into a improper fraction, multiply the top, multiply the bottom, simplify, you're done. Let's say, what if you had something like 4 times 2/5? So if you have that, if you have a whole number, you're just going to, since you have to multiply numerators, you can just put over 1 and say 4 times 2 equals 8, 1 times 5 equals 5. Turn that into a mixed number. So let's say 1 whole is 5 pieces. So that's 1 wholes, and then 3/5 left. So again, just multiplying straight across. So pretty easy. Now there's one thing you can do when you start to have bigger fractions, especially, that's going to make your life a little easier, and that is called cross simplifying. So I'm going to go over that real quick. So simplifying, which is, we've been doing that a bunch already, right? That's pretty straightforward. If I had something like 2/6, I would divide those numerator and denominator by 2 by common factors, and I would get 1/3. Now, cross simplifying is really just simplifying while you are multiplying. Instead of simplifying sort of up and down in one fraction, you're going to be simplifying across fractions. So cross simplifying, again, it's just kind of a shortcut. It's not going to change the answer. So then if it's kind of confusing for you, you don't have to do it. But ultimately, it's going to make your life a little bit easier. So we'll look at the same problem we did with the first one on the left-hand side. So if I had something like 2/3 times 1/2. So how this is going to work is, normally when we simplify, again, we're looking at sort of like up and down in one fraction. This time, instead, we're going to look sort of at diagonals. So sometimes what I would do is, if I had my fingers on the screen, I would kind of cover up the 3 and the 1, and instead I'm going to look at these diagonals right here. I'm going to think, okay, if I had 2/2, what could I divide by? And those can both be divided by 2. So then you could either write like divided by 2, and then cross that out and put 1, across that and put 1. That gets kind of messy. So usually when I do it, I just sort of think in my head, what am I dividing by? I'm like, oh, I'm dividing by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And again, you have to divide that numerator 1 in the top left and the denominator on the bottom right by the same number. So I divided those both by 2. Then I would uncover these ones and look at these diagonals and think, do 3 and 1 have any common factors? Which they do not. So then I would just multiply across. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 1 is 3, and I get 1/3. So again, it's the same answer over here as I got over here on the left and the right. So you might look at this and think, oh, that didn't really save much time. And you would be correct in saying that. So let's look at an example where maybe it would save a little bit of time. So let's say I had something like 6 3/4, and I was multiplying by 1 1/3. So again, if you're multiplying mixed numbers, we're going to turn them both into improper fractions. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 gives me 27/4. 1 times 3 is 3, plus 1 is 4/3. So now I'm working with slightly larger numbers. 4 times 27. Maybe you could do it in your head, but you might have to grab a calculator or write it out on the side. But if I cross simplify here, it's actually going to make this a lot easier. So again, I'm going to cover up, sort of not think about those numbers. I'm just putting gray over them because I'm not thinking about them. And I'm only going to think about these numbers right here. So the top left and the bottom right. I'm going to think, do they have any common factors? And yes, they both can be divided by 3. So I'm going to do 27 divided by 3, which would give me 9. And 3 divided by 3, which would give me 1. So again, I divided by the same number, both of them divided by 3. Then I'm going to uncover those and sort of think, okay, now what about these ones? Do they have any common factors there? Right? And I can divide them both by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Now I would multiply across. 9 times 1 is 9. Denominator is 1 times 1 is 1. So that gives us 9 as an answer. So that definitely did save us some time in dealing with bigger numbers. We'll look at one more example with even larger fractions. Let's say I had something like 24/25 times, let's say 2 3/16. Okay, so now we're looking at much larger numbers. We have to turn those into improper fractions. So let's say I got 24/25 times 2 times 16 is 32, 33, 34, 35/16. So now we're definitely looking at much bigger numbers. I'm going to make that 1 look more like a 1. 24 times 25, probably going to have to either write that out inside as a calculator. 25 times 16, probably the same thing. But instead, I'm going to look at my diagonals. So I'm not even going to sort of cover them up. I'm just going to think 24 and 16. Do they have any common factors? Oh, I could divide those both by 8. So 24 divided by 8 turns into 3, and 16 divided by 8 equals 2. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the other diagonals, my 24 and the 35. I can divide those both by 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. And now I have 3/5 times 7/2, which is much smaller, and I can definitely do in my head. 3 times 7 gives me 21. 5 times 2 gives me 10. I have to turn it into a mixed number for my final answer, so that would equal 2 1/10. Right? So that we can see right there, cross-simplifying definitely saved us some time by simplifying before we got to the end. Otherwise, we'd have huge numbers and have to think about a bunch of simplifying down and that kind of thing. So that's, again, multiplying fractions. Pretty straightforward as far as all the different fraction operations. Good luck.